Okay, now halacha of vav. Okay, this is the halacha of Kashering glass. So I'm going to mention that we already spoke about a whole bunch of examples by Kashering glass. Way back in the beginning of Tasmanal, we spoke about using hotel glasses. We spoke about halacha of vav, that Kashering glass stovetop. In halacha of gimel, we talked about ovens and porcelain enamel, which is a different form of glass. And even the Ramah that we're going to talk about over here, there's going to be a Ramah in this thing also, about silver cups that are coated with glass is also going to be talking on the Chaf Gimel. Okay, so we'll talk about what we have left over here. Glass chuchas, a few machnisim l'kiyim, glass kelim. Even if you machnisim l'kiyim, there's a long bleed in there to cover for a very long time. A few mishtamash and b'cham, even if you use them for hot, ein tzorach shem hechsher. The mechaber says they don't need any kashering. She'enim boilim, they don't absorb anything. And if you rinse them off well, that's good enough. There are those who are machmir and say that schuch is not only the mechaber says it doesn't absorb it all, so of course you're not kasher. And the Ramah says that you can't even kasher it absorbs and you can't even kasher it. That's our minig for the Ashkenazim. And then he finishes off with this thing about the silver cups. This is the Ramah says that if the silver cups have glass on the inside, then you can't cash them. But if they have glass on the outside, then you can. We spoke about that in the Choftim. Okay, so within the din, the Mechaber Ramah is a well-known machlokes Mechaber Ramah. There's really there are 4 shittas about kashering glass. We'll do 3 of them for now, and 1 we'll leave for later. And the 3 shittas are many Rishonim hold that glass is just like cheres because it's made the same way that you make cheres. You take something out of the ground. In the case of glass, it's sand. In cheres, it's clay. You take it out of the ground, put it into a kiln, it all of a sudden becomes a very different material than it used to be. It has very different properties than it used to. So since they're so similar, just like Torah says you can't kasher cheres, then also now the kasher glass also. So that's one extreme. What's one extreme?
That's Shita?
That's one extreme. There's many Rishonim, some Rishonim hold like that. Okay, a small group of Rishonim like that. Then most Rishonim hold the exact opposite Shita, which is that glass is hard and smooth, and they compare it to the Gemara that talks about a lathe being smooth and it's not balea. So they say is because of that, it doesn't have any bleeds into it at all. Okay, so once you get rid of the end, then you're completely off the hook. Most Rishonim hold like that. That's how most Rishonim hold. And then there's a middle shita, which is the shita of the Ran and the Ra'ah. The Ran, the Ran who says that really glass is balea, but the bleed that it takes in is less than any other kind of kli, any other material. So you do have to kasher it because there is a certain amount of blia, but there's such a small amount of blia that you could easily get rid of it, and you just do a regular hagol to it and get rid of it. Okay, from metal, if you get rid of the blia from metal, you can sure get rid of the blia from glass. Okay. Now there's a possible right to this shiloh from the Gemara. The Gemara Moni de Kunya, which is halacha of Gimel. We talked about then why there isn't a right. The Gemara there says that if you have glass coating on cheres kli, then you can't kasher it, and it's like cheres. So why isn't that an obvious Gemara saying that glass is below like cheres is? We talked about it over there. There's different shots as to why it's not right. Okay. Now there's another potential riot to this din, okay, which we're not going to talk about today. Maybe we'll do it next week, or maybe we'll just completely skip it. Is that if you read, the simple reading is that there's an Avostra of Nassim that says that glass is not below. Okay, and a lot of the Rishonim talk about it. Maybe we'll talk about it next week, or maybe we'll just leave it on the side. The Shiloh of the Rishonim is to why there isn't a riot from a Beferisha. It seems like a Beferisha of a certain Nassim that glass is not below. Okay, so what's this? Okay, so the first thing that I don't know if it's the first thing that strikes you as odd is that now can't tell you that I looked at every single word, but it seems to me that there's no tour about this thing. It's a machlokes Rishonim. The big shiloh in the Rishonim what they did is about this thing, and that I don't see that there's a tour that talks about the shiloh. I don't know why. Okay, the tour ends off the siman with the halacha before ours. Okay, about cups, and he says so cups, whatever material they're made out of, you just rinse them off. And he mentions even if they're made out of glass. Okay, but he's not. But there, because he holds, you follow the word tashmishay. So he says even if it's made out of cheres. So it's not because he's not mentioning. He's not talking about the din of whether glass is like cheres or not cheres. He says even made it like cheres, you just rinse it off. That's what we had to do before. You follow Rav Tashmishay. So, and I didn't see it here. I don't see it in Kuf Chafals in your day where he talks how it goes Kalim. We talked about plenty of shilos over there also. He mentions glass like it's not really there. There's no. There's to me it's odd that there's no. Maybe I'm missing it. I obviously am missing it. Or that there's no. The Torah doesn't just say what he holds about. There's a big machlokes Shulchan. Okay. Anyhow, but the Mechaber does the Beis Yosef talks about it, and the Mechaber talks about it. And the Mechaber holds like the most cool Dikashita. He holds that glass is not Beleh, and you can do whatever you want to with it. And that's what the Sfardim do. Most Sfardim go like the Mechaber, like this Mechaber, and they use glasses for milchus and places, kosher and treif, chametz and pesach, all like that. They can do whatever they want. And the Ramah says that the minig by Ashkenazim is to go to the most chomer Dikashita, which is, we have three sheets. It goes to the most chomer that is Beleh, and it can't be kasher, and we treat it like cheres. Okay? So let's look at the Ramah, Ashkenazim, the Ramah in a bunch of pratim within the Ramah. Okay, first of all, the Mishabur points out, and this is that usually, at least in the case of Shulchan Aruch, the way you use glass is Rav Tashmishay is not with hot. Okay? In those days for Shulchan, Rav Tashmishay with glass couldn't handle really a lot of heat, so it was used for drinking cold beverages. Don't put coffee into a glass. So it's Rav Tashmishay. So he says, just remember that there's a regular din. We've mentioned 1,000 times that Rav Tashmishay is only a chumrah. So if it's going to be a shas of chag, it's going to be some kind of a problem. Then you're going to say, fine, you don't have to chashish for me a tashmisha, because that's just like a general thing. That's not really negate to the glass shaboy. Okay, now, but what negate to the glass is that the Darkei Moshe over here says that in B'diavad, this chumrah that he says that you can't kash the glass is only l'chachila, but B'diavad, you could be makel that glass. Okay, so that's what Darkei Moshe says. There's a machlokes now in the later Achronim. What does that mean? That b'diavad you could be making like glass. The Taz says that b'diavad means you could be samach on the mechaber. B'diavad means you put food into a glass container. Let's say on Pesach you put a coffee into a cup that had potentially been used with chametz, and you already did it. And they have this coffee now sitting there. So is it mutter or is it aser? You didn't do anything to it. You just pulled the glass out of the wrong place. So the Taz says, b'diavad you could be samach on the mechaber that there's no blias and you can use it as is. Okay, the Magen Avram says, b'diavad only means is if you kashered it and you did like the middle shita, like the Ran says that if you kasher glass you can get the blias out of it, then you could be samach on it. But if you didn't kasher it at all, you just took a chametz stick of glass and used it, then that's not a case of b'diavad. That's not what the Darkei Moshe means to be makel. So even in cases like the mechaber. Okay, so even his b'diavad, there's machlokes now what he means by the case of the b'diavad. The Pri Megadim is the one who points out the diak to read the Taz and Magen Avram like that. It's not. I don't know if everybody would have thought of that to see it like that. And the Pri Megadim is machriya. You laugh because he's machriya to usually b'diavad to follow the Taz, but if it's a really b'diavad, then to follow the Magen Avram. Okay, the other way around. To follow the Magen Avram, to only use it if you kasher it first. But if it's really like a hepsid meruba, whatever the words are, then you could be samach on the Taz also. Okay, so these two shitas in the thing, and the Bishop brings both of these. So with these two shitas as to whether what the Ramah holds in case of the b'diavad is also a question what that is. And okay, there's an example of this of this relying on this thing, practical example for commercial kashrus, which is glass line reactor. Okay, in many companies, who do reactions, that means that they're heating up they're putting different chemicals together, and they're reacting with each other. And often those reactions, either they add heat to it or they create heat, and they need to have special kind of kalim. And they're very sensitive that they want to make sure that there's no carryover of taste of chemicals from one to the next thing. So they want to use a glass line reactor. The glass can handle the heat, and it can handle doesn't carry over time, and it doesn't. It can take the corrosiveness of the chemicals and all kinds of reasons why they use it. So on the outside, it's metal, and on the inside, it's glass. Okay, and this is a common thing that's used. So the question is if you can kasher them, and the obvious thing to say is no, of course you can't kasher them because they're made of glass. The whole inside of it is made out of glass. Okay, but in fact, as far as I know, most hashgachos do kasher glass line reactors. Okay, we do have an exception. There's something in one of our companies that we have a special ingredient was made for Pesach on a glass line reactor that was kasher. Okay, and there's a person who buys from that company who says they must take out that ingredient whenever they make this product. Right, so if your food doesn't taste as well in Pesach, it's because they take out that one ingredient because he doesn't like that one ingredient because it was made on kasher kale. That's what goes on. But as a rule, people do, as far as I know, kasher these glass line reactors, and Rabbi Schechter understood it because we're talking about if you can't kasher glass line reactors, he's not judging it by the specific case, but in the overall, if you won't be able to kasher glass line reactors, that would put a tremendous crimp into the ability to make kosher food, because people who make these kind of reactions a lot better are all kosher, or it's hard for them to be all kosher, or for that matter, if they ever made treif, they could never become kosher. So it would put it's a big crimp into the whole, so to speak, kosher industry. So he looks at it as a shas l'chad. Okay, so it's by him it's a shas l'chad for the Evid. So he says, so the Taz says b'di Evid, or another way of saying it, b'shas l'chad. So you'll be samach on the he said to do like the Magen Avraham, that you should kasher it. Okay, you could rely if you kasher it, just clear so you can kasher it, and it's good enough. He adds in that you might as well kasher it 3 times to be mitzaref the sheet of the Baal Eater, who says that you could 3 hagolos on cheres does something. Okay, we've talked about that once. We've pointed that 3 hagolos maybe does. So he said, okay, kasher 3 times. Now, there's no problem kashering these things. They can handle heat. They're made to handle heat. So that's what he says to kasher 3 times. That's an example.
We don't do that.
We don't do it?
Do we have in such an instance? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't even know companies with that.
Okay.
Is it typical? What?
I know it's a reactor.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
Is it typical for a glass line?
I don't know if it's more or less likely to be, but it's very recent. It's not unusual. I don't know if it's most of them or most of them not, but it's not at all unusual.
So looking at it, it's obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, just so it's they just opened it up. Right?
Okay. So no. Okay, but it's very that's an example of here's glass, we don't kasher glass, but it's only a chumrah. And the Taz says, so the Taz himself says that b'di Evid you could be samach, or say the Magen Avraham. B'di Evid you could be samach and use it. You could kasher it. The Ramah only means as a l'chatzilu. So this is an example of a shas l'chad b'di Evid. Again, you might not be able to point at each case and say, is it really so important that we get this ingredient from this company? Right. But he's looking at it as a more global picture. Okay, that's a judgment. You have to look at it more globally.
How would you do this 3 times?
How do you do 3 times?
How would you do this 3 times?
You fill up, you kasher it,
right.
Drain out the water, put in fresh water, and do it again. You have to do three separate times of water.
And there's no you can do one right straight after the other.
Yeah. The point of it is it comes from the Sefer Yitzchak comes from a Yerushalmi who says that you could do. And there is a case that you could do it. The shaila is what the Yerushalmi means to say, and the thinking is that cheres has bliyas are very hard to get those bliyas out. So you say if we do it 3 times, by that time I'll have gotten out so much of bliya that I did enough for each other. The Torah just says you can't kasher it once, but at least in certain cases you could do 3 kashrings, you basically got all the bliyas out.
So that's a marker for Moshe?
That what? To do
about clay Paris, expensive. China. China is expensive. You do it 3 times.
Right. Well, that's an extra tziruf, right? He's being matariv. That there are cases when 3 hagol there's such an idea that maybe it does something. So in a case when you're being makel, so you'll say, okay, so I'll be makel, and I'll say at least do it 3 times. At least.
But not real credit. Moshe only says it on porcelain, on China.
Right.
Okay, whatever. Fine. Well, that's for a different question, different thing. Okay, another shayla in the Ramah. The Ramah is saying a chumrah that you shouldn't kasher glass. So there are those who hold, they say from a Knesset though, that the Ramah only means to be machmer for Pesach. This is a chumrah. Most Rishonim do not hold like this. Most Rishonim hold that there's no bliyas. So the Ramah who's being machmer is only being machmer for Pesach. When he says that you shouldn't use kasher glass, he only means to say is for Pesach I mean to kasher that. Alright, it only says in Hilchos Pesach. Now that last part is I'm saying it sort of sarcastically, because of course all Hagol's came was in Hilchos Pesach. Okay, just that. But they do say that. But anyhow, so they say no, it's only a chumrah for Pesach. It's a chumrah for Pesach. You don't want to have on Pesach the chash of even the bliya, but since there's no bliyas, you don't have to worry about you kash. Okay, and the raya against it, first of all, the simplest raya is that how come someone doesn't say so? Why doesn't the Rambam say something? Why doesn't someone say something that has to do with just Pesach? But the raya against it, I've mentioned this before. The raya against that pshita is like this. the Magen Avram right on this didn't answer the question. He says, how come over here the Ramah says you can't kasher glass in Hilchos Klei Yayin, and you want to kasher things used for wine? The Mechaber says you can kasher that covers of wine in it. The Mechaber gives all kinds of examples of all kinds of materials. He lists of a whole slew of materials that you can kasher, including glass. So, how come the Ramah doesn't argue about glass over there? Why doesn't he argue and say that glass is different? So the Magen Avram says the answer is because there's special kula of stam yayin. So although usually the Ramah says to be machmir, there's a special kula because stam yayin has certain kulas to it, and therefore that's why he's being maker. So what is he saying to you? He's saying it bothered him that there was a certain case, not in Hilchos Pesach, that you say that he wanted to know how come you don't say that glass you shouldn't catch a glass. So he obviously understood that the Ramah means by all dinim. And so what? Stam yayin is a special kula, but he understood by all dinim. Okay, that din happens to be that din of stam yayin has ramifications. Okay, this that we can kasher with kula glass from stam yayin does have ramifications. In kasher in a place that was made stam yayin, that Magen Avram is negated. I'm not bringing it for that. I'm just mentioning it to say that you see that the Ramah's Chumrah, he understood Ramah's Chumrah to be for all over the place. Okay. Then there's another thing, which is what this is just as a lesson from this din, if you could call that, is that here we have a material that to our eyes and to the most Rishonim say, we're not the ones to make it up. There's no blias in glass. Okay, no one seems to be arguing about whether there's blias or not. They're just saying maybe we should treat it like Kashrus or things like that. But there don't seem to be blias. So why is Ramah being machmir to say you should not be able to kasher? What is he being machmir for? He's looking at a material that to everyone's appearance doesn't have any blias in it, but yet he's being machmir to treat it something, to say that yes, it does have blias. Okay, to the point that he maybe has it like Kashrus, but the point that he's treating it like blias.
How do you know that no one says there's not the way?
There's a machlokes Rishonim about whether it's belay or not.
Right.
I'm sorry, it's not a machlokes. The Rishonim say that it's not belay, and everyone's personal experience is that it's not belay either. So what's the reason to be machmir for this? So I'm trying to bring out just a lesson from this. Nothing to do with glass, which is when we look at materials nowadays, and you say, well, if all the rabbis, we saw this yesterday, if all the rabbis don't see any blias coming out of the things, why don't we say there's no blias? You don't have to kasher things. So you just see a certain caution in the Ramah here that even though to all our appearances appears there are no blias, we're not going to just throw all the dinim out. We don't just throw out all the dinim just because to our appearance there appears to be no blias. So we take the dinim at face value, even though to us we don't seem to see the bli in front of us that we need to kasher from. Okay, so we look at stainless steel and we say stainless steel, there's no blias. We see blias going through the other side of the cable. The din says there is. We don't see any blias. So it's just like a caution says this question once came up beforehand. But Ramah lived, I don't know, you tell us how many years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, I don't know, however long ago he lived. And he looked at, he had glass in his house, he didn't see any blias in it, but he was cautious and didn't jump and therefore you can touch it. So I'm not saying you should always do that. I'm just saying that we have a dogma of one time when this shaila came up, and the answer was that we're machmir, that we do say it's belay, even though to our appearance it's not belay. Okay, okay. I'm going to mention one other thing. Let's say one other thing, which is like this. There's a shaila in the Achronim, and only the Achronim can answer this question, about how to treat pyrex. Okay, pyrex is a type of glass that can go on the fire. Okay, it's way beyond glass of Chazal. It's not only can you drink it, you can cook it, you can cook it, you can freeze it. There's all kinds of special properties to it. Okay, and it's
tempered glass, right?
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay. So what's unusual here is that two contemporary Achronim, okay, look at this exactly opposite of each other. Okay, in Tzitz Eliezer, he says
the shaila about it
is how does it fit into these dinim? Is it any different than these dinim? And which way you'll hear from the two answers how what the question was. Okay,
you're not afraid it's going to break.
Right, that's correct.
Right.
Okay, so
then the same thing would be aligning to the reactor.
No. The question is, right. You're right. What this question about pyrex, you're right. Is very negative to the glass on reactor. Right. You're correct about that. You're right, because that's the same kind of a glass that can handle. You sit and cook in it, even hotter than in your oven. That's true. I didn't think of it like that, but that's true. But Tzitz Eliezer says, he says, even the Sfardim who are makel that glass, wouldn't be makel about Pyrex. He says, because they were only makel about glass that had a blear like in a kli rishon. Yeah, you put some hot soup in, you put some hot into it, it came near the fire a little bit, but the mamish cooked in it. He says, who says that the Sfardim would be makel about that? Who says that all those Rishonim were makel? Who said they would say that? I'm not sure why. He says, who knows? It has, you're making a blear in a very different kind of a way, and maybe they wouldn't be makel. Then he says another thing, which I don't understand what he means. He says, maybe it has such different properties than other glass, which it does. It's very different than regular glass, that even what the Rishonim say that it's shia, v'loy bali, it's smooth and hard, and it's not belair, maybe it doesn't have those properties either. That I don't understand, because being hard and smooth is something that just, you look at it. Like glass is smooth and ceramic is not. Cheres is very, looks like it's porous. And glass doesn't, seems very smooth. So I don't know why he would say that it doesn't seem to be sheer. And he says maybe it's not sheer because it's a different kind of glass. It sure seems to be. It seems to have the same properties of being smooth and hard as opposed to cheres. So I'm not sure what that means. But he says is maybe even the machaber would be machmer on that because it's not the same kind of glass. They were talking about this kind of glass, okay? And then the opposite of that, almost the opposite of that is, Rav Avad Yosef, the Abi Omer, says even the Ashkenazim would be makel about this kind of stuff. He says, in the end, he says, you know what? Maybe they Kashrus 3 times. Okay, so the Ashkenazim they Kashrus 3 times like the Rabbi Shachar. Let them Kashrus 3 times. He says that even Ashkenazim, because this stuff is and he brings in the Ritva. Okay, that was the 4th sheet of that glass that you sort of were being maram. There's a 4th sheet that the Sharatzim brings in, which is that the really glass can be kasher. But the problem is that you're afraid to kasher glass because you're going to break it. And that the really minhadin you need to and you could kasher glass. But the reason why you can't is because if you're going to kasher it, you're going to break it. Imagine who said this? It's a Ritva and a Ra'ah, put in the Sharatzim, okay? Who says that if you'll stick the glass, don't think about your glass now. Think about glass from 100 years ago that wasn't strong enough really to handle heat. If you're going to dunk it into boiling water, you're afraid it's going to crack, which is what happens.
They say solid cash.
So really, it's like the middle sheet of that it needs to be kasher and it can be kasher. Theoretically, it can be kasher, but if you're going to use it, if you're going to kasher it, you're going to be afraid to break it. And we know.
That's the reason why it can't be kasher.
Right. It's not the reason why it can't kasher. Not because of the glass, because of the glass is like cherish, but it's because glass is fragile and you're going to break it. So when you're afraid you're going to break something, we had way back at the beginning that you're not a kasher thing because you're afraid you're going to break
glass stovetops also. Right.
Glass stovetop, yes.
Right.
Correct. Via the Kashering. That's but not because of the glass, because you're afraid to break it. Correct.
Why does the Sharatzim bring it down?
Why does he bring it? Well, it's not a well accepted shita. It's like another shita. He's bringing it as a tziruf. Okay, to say in certain cases you could be samach on that if you could kasher it right. So it's I think if I remember that's why he brings it. Okay, so the Abi Omer says that these glass, this stuff can handle heat like anything. This stuff, you're not afraid of breaking this stuff at all. It has, you can even take it from the freezer right into the oven, from the oven into the freezer. It has all these it can handle all kinds of stuff. He says there's no problem with that. So he says even the Ashkenazim would be makel, that would be willing to be cast this kind of material. Okay, so of course it's a little bit funny, but the Ashkenazi is saying that the Sfardim should agree to him, and the Sfardim is saying that the Ashkenazim should agree to him.
That's not funny.
That's not funny. Okay, that's right. So there's opposite approaches to it, and as you probably were waiting for me to say, Rabbi Dosky will have to do exactly like he won't take one shita. Rabbi Dosky says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky told him that even all the kulas about glass don't apply to Pyrex because it's on the fire, it's a whole different thing, and therefore, like the Tzitz Eliezer, he didn't use those words, but like the Tzitz Eliezer, it's right on the fire, so no way that you could use it, it's no kulas of glass. And what you were pointing out is that if that's true, then the glass on reactor, right, which is so this is Pyrex. So what are we saying? Going with coolers and saying we're going to be mako like the Rambam is only a chumrah, because then you shouldn't do that because this is right on the fire. That's why I didn't think of it connecting those two pieces. But yeah, and Rabbi Shachar says just the opposite. He says glass. We know anyhow glass is a chumrah to think that it's bleh at all. This stuff is of course made to not be bleh. He just says it as a story. This is Rabbi Shachar is not into stories, but he says he once had a chemistry lab, okay? He was in a lab in college, and he had to do something with Pyrex. And he said to teachers, something like, they were talking about whether glass is belair. teacher was like, are you crazy? He said, we use Pyrex in the lab because we know it's not the lab. We're here in the lab where things are so sensitive. We use Pyrex because we don't want to make any bleeds. So what are you telling me that this bleeds? So that at least pushed them in the direction of saying more, like Rav you say, which is that this stuff is even better than glass. I mean, even the machmir about glass would be more makel about this. Okay, so as you maybe I don't know if you expected or you didn't, but Rav will think very opposite about it. But in the Lamaisa, the glass reactors people do kasher, and for this reason, at least
that they do 3 times.
Okay. So
I don't know.
Okay.
Just practically speaking.
Big time.
Sure.
Okay. At least to say either like I rejected completely that the Pyrex is more cold than glass, or at least the middle says at least like glass. That you have the potential cools of glass. You don't say, oh, it's glass and it can't be kasher. At least to lead in that direction. Okay. What we're not doing, maybe we'll do it next week, or maybe we'll just skip it. Is what I mentioned about the Aruch of Nasim. There's also another case of glass. Maybe we'll do it next week. About which are reasonably common, which is you have pipes that's all made out of stainless, but there's glass, a sight glass in the middle of it. There'll be a tank, and there's a way to look into the tank. It has a little piece of glass there that you could look through. Okay, so whether you can catch anything of that. So let's read that. Maybe we'll do it next week. Next week's halacha is not as complicated. Maybe we'll do it together with next week's halacha and do Aruch of Nasim with that also.